Welcome back to the Links Golf Podcast. I am Al Lunsford, digital editor for Links, in the garage today amongst the shovels and the rakes and etc. Joined by Joe Passoff. Joe, how you doing today?
Al, things are okay out here. We're due for a 116-degree day in Phoenix, but no rain.
Yeah, your dry 116-degree days, just a run-of-the-mill day in Arizona, I guess.
Yes, not a record. Correct.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about, obviously we're on the heels of the U.S. Open. We're going to get some U.S. Open reactions quickly. I just visited Baltusrol Golf Club in Springfield, New Jersey this past week and had the chance to sit down with Gil Hanse, who handled the restoration of the upper course and the lower course there. The upper course just opened in May, so they were sort of unveiling that. So I had 10 minutes with him. He was very gracious to give us that quick 5 question interview for Gil. That's on the back half of this episode. And we'll just talk a little bit about Baltusrol before then, too. But before we kick all of that off, first question, quick for you, Joe. Gonna throw a recent poll question we did in the Links Insider. We do those on Sundays. We'll put a question out to our audience and get some responses and share those the following week. So, recent question we had, Joe. What is the least confident club in your bag? What club are you least confident hitting when the situation arises?
Al, I don't think we have enough time on this podcast for me to discuss the issues and deficiencies going on with all 14 in my bag. But maybe most frustrating is just struggle a little bit with the 3 wood from the fairway, which for a long, long time was a really good go-to club for me. Maybe with a few misses, you get a little more tentative, and it's just not producing with any consistency. And maybe go out and work on, or maybe not, and just hope for the best.
That's
How
one
about
for
you?
me. Yeah, that's up there for me for sure. I went through a period of time before I got the three what I'm using now where I just had zero confidence in that club. So a fitting and a new club later, and I was uh, sort of comfortable back in the saddle with that thing. But for me, I would have to say right now. And it's funny because I feel like I used to be really good with this club, but my 60-degree wedge, my lob wedge, is just something that I'm sort of tending to lean on my 54 degree. It feels more comfortable in most situations around the green with that 54 in my hands. The 60 is kind of like special circumstances. If I have a short shot where I have to get loft on it to get it to stop, and so it's a pressure packed shot type of situation. So I'm feel like I'm putting this unfair um, expectation that like, all right, you got one shot and this is what you have to do with it. And then when it doesn't pan out, it's just not something I feel really great with in my hands right now. So 60-degree for me.
Yeah, it's unfortunately that's that club. You talk about confidence. If you're tentative at all with a 60, it's just not going to happen for you. Um, whether thin, thick, or otherwise, it absolutely got to be full throttle, full commitment to that club.
Good segue. Full throttle, full commitment. Those are things that we heard U.S. Open champion J.J. Spawn talk a lot about. And if you're going to hit golf shots, at least be committed to them. He was your U.S. Open champion that no one really saw coming. I mean, obviously, he had that great finish at the Players, the Monday playoff against Rory McIlroy at the Players Championship this year. But going into the week, I don't remember. I've heard it said a couple of times. The odds were very, very long on J.J. Spawn. It seemed like it was going to be one of those top guys who could bomb it out there, or Scotty Scheffler, who is such a good iron player. But JJ, also a tremendous iron player in his own right. Um, Story of the week, maybe though, was this golf course and how it challenged players and how only one player finished under par because he made a 64-foot bomb on the last hole for birdie. Uh, Joe, just your takeaways, if you have a couple of things that after watching that spectacle, especially on Sunday when it was just utter chaos, what were your takeaways from this U.S. Open?
Yeah, it did remind me of an old-fashioned U.S. Open, the ones that I kind of remember from my youth, which was just a war of attrition. That when we saw +4 posted by John Rahm well before play finished, it was the kind of score you could contemplate somehow being near there at the end. Because for all those years, the USGA set up US Open courses the same way: narrow fairways, brick hard greens, super deep rough. It was under pressure who could simply find a fairway, find a green, hole a lot of 4 foot kinds of putts. And that's what this one really reminded me of. To each his own. I think there are a lot of golf fans out there that like this for the US Open. Um, Oakmont is considered about the toughest of the tough, and it lived up to its billing. I don't know that the rough needed to be 5 inches, especially when it got wet. Uh, the last 9 holes, 12 holes, when things came back from the rain delay, just a lot of pure hacking out that I think to some extent diminishes the skill, the recovery skills of the best players in the world, the creativity of the best players in the world. And okay, that's what we came to love about Sevi at the Open Championship, or about certain players at the Masters. The U.S. Open was, got took a different track for a little while, and this year it seemed to be back on what it used to be in terms of the presentation. Um, and yet you had a deserving winner, even though he was not the odds-on favorite when the week started.
Maybe there's a middle ground with the rough. I mean, yeah, 5 inches, it just seemed like anything could happen once you got into the rough. And many cases there was just no chance of doing anything but like you talked about, just sort of getting out of it and trying to save a par, but often being faced with bogey. I think for me, I just like the change of pace. Like the brutality of Oakmont is not something we get. It's been a decade since we had to really deal with that. So I love the fact that we can anticipate the next one. It was fun to hear the guys talk about horror stories from the last one that was at Oakmont. So I like it in its special niche once every few years, as now will be an anchor site, and we can look back and then really, look forward, be gluttons for punishment almost. We're like, okay, this is going to be different and really hard. A lot of people are not going to like it that are in the field, but viewing, you just have no. That's one thing I'll remember for next time. Uh, it's tough to make a prediction at this golf course because anyone can come out of it as the winner. If the putter gets hot, um, depending on what the weather does, it could look a lot different. So I just like it being this solitary, unique bruiser and maybe the most difficult golf course in the world to play.
Well, especially in contrast to last year's venue, which almost couldn't be more different, except for its incredible tradition with Pinehurst number two having off the ball could slip into maybe a great lie on the hard packed sand, or you're in one of those little grassy clumps that could make life very, very difficult for you. But it was the luck of the draw, where, Oakmont, it was mostly bad luck, a few straight from the fairway.
And I think, to have the tournament end the way it did, sitting there with JJ Spawn 2 putts to win, I think it would have kind of taken the wind out of the sails. The way the audience wins is if he somehow three putts that, and then you get the playoff with Bob McIntyre, who had had a tremendous run on Sunday. Or what ended up happening, and he cashes that long putt for this moment that otherwise would have sort of been, yeah, almost boring to me. If he had just two putted for par and won the U.S. Open, it's a great moment, but it's sort of like, okay, he did it, congratulations. But to just
Well,
get that putt to go
y-
in, it was electric.
yeah, that's what's going to be our takeaway. Years from now, we're going to remember uh, a 6-foot putt for birdie that ultimately clinched it. And perhaps some will remember him hitting a fantastic tee shot at 17 and a
Right.
comfortable two-putt birdie. Amazing finish. But, the other thing is with a JJ Spawn, who I think America just really embraced. A true everyman kind of story with a lot of feel good at. But he shouldn't have been as big a surprise winner as he was made out to be, because I think of a few other recent winners. I'm going back to Wyndham Clark in 2023, Gary Woodland 2019, Lucas Glover in 2009, where they weren't necessarily top 10, top 15, top 20 kind of favorites, but they had played really, really well recently, including that same year. All of them had had some fantastic finishes. In some cases, Wyndham Clark had just won at Wells Fargo 2023 U.S. Open win, and Wells Fargo with Quail Hollow, very much a U.S. Open kind of feel golf course. So again, Gary Woodland, Lucas Glover, surprise winners, if you will, but look back at the record and how they were doing that year, and they were among the better players on tour leading up to the U.S. Open. So maybe we shouldn't have been as surprised by J.J. Spawn doing as well as he did. Not just a runner-up to Rory in the playoff loss of the Players, but a T2 at Palm Beach Gardens, a PGA National, a heck of a tough golf course, where a tie for second, tie for third at Sony, tie for 15th at a tough course, Torrey Pines South, the Farmers. So he had been playing great on tough courses leading up to this. Man, maybe there were some betting people out there that did very well by considering that when they were placing their bets.
I will be curious to see what his odds are at the Open Championship at Portrush. It seems like a kind of game that could actually do well there as well. So remains to be seen. Will remain to be seen what his career looks like. Is he going to be one of these one-off major winners that um, when we're 5 years from now, who won the U.S. Open in 2025? Are we gonna get it right off the bat? But congrats to JJ Spawn. Let's move on to Baltusrol and what I saw there. Joe, I know you've covered Baltusrol over the years. This was a really, really big project that in 2021 began with Gil restoring the lower course at Baltusrol, which is more of the big championship test historically. I, Baltusrol is the only golf club anywhere in the world to host both the, well, we'll talk about U.S. courses because it's the only course to host the U.S. men's and women's opens on both of its designs. It's a 36-hole club. So both the upper and the lower have hosted the men's and women's national championships. I mean, nothing to sneeze at there. That obviously makes Baltusrol one of the most storied golf clubs in the country. As such, it's a national historic landmark given that designation in 2014. So Gil just finished the work on the upper course that opened in May, and I got to play both. What a absolute joy that was, and really appreciate the um, hospitality of Baltusrol Golf Club being there. Great juxtaposition between the two courses. The lower just sits flatter on the land, the upper sort of on this ridge line up top in line with the clubhouse there. Um, Guild, hear from him. He sort of describe the difference between the two. Tillinghast maybe with a little less to work with from a landform standpoint on the lower, got a little bit more aggressive with his course features. It was fun to talk to Gil and then go play and then see, what he was talking about there. So, wonderful time at Baltusrol. Also, speaking of shovels, Joe, I did get the chance to go and check off Rock Spring Golf Club off my list. I know we talked about that a few weeks ago on the Golden Age Publix podcast. So I was able to get out there. Great daily fee facility. I would highly recommend it to anybody who's up in the area. Uh, Steam shovel. That's why I said, speaking of shovels, um, picked up the design from Rayner and put it in place. And just these landforms, the massive drop offs off the greens, and some of those iconic templates are there for you to see. So in great shape, super fun. Views of the skyline in the distance. I mean, it's wonderful. I would love to go back there. Um, so, getting on to Baltusrol, Joe. Um, where does this club fit in just in stature for you in the country?
Yeah, Baltusrol as a club still is royalty. Not only have U.S. men's and women's opens taken place on both their golf courses, but those courses replaced an earlier golf course that was on the property that also hosted a U.S. Open. So it goes back to ancient times by U.S. standards. Two tremendous golf courses by A.W. Tillinghast. Not too far away, of course, he did the same thing 36 holes for Wingfoot, another cathedral of the game. And yet, the two courses at Baltusrol have more variety between the two than the course. So it's an interesting, wonderful aspect to Baltusrol for the membership to have what passes for a mountain course in New Jersey, and then also kind of a bigger, brawnier golf course, more famous in the lower course. So lower, upper, two phenomenal golf courses. Gil Hanse, fresh off a recent restoration, renovation of Oakmont. And the segue there is Baltusrol. Gil is on an incredible roll, and the fact that you got to experience both courses that he has restored over the last couple of years, good for you. Tip of the cap. An incredible day of golf.
Seminole to that's where Gil was headed after he had to stop in PGA Frisco because he did Field Ranch East, which is hosting the KPMG Women's PGA Championship. As we speak on this podcast, it'll be over by the time this comes out, but uh, went straight from Baltusrol to there and then over to Seminole. So he's on a heater, as they say. Um, and yeah, the next time we'll see Baltusrol is probably the 2029 PGA Championship. Men's Championship returns to that lower course in a few years, and they'll be ready. Fresh off this restoration, they can fine tune some things up. Playing in that rough there at Baltusrol, um, I was sort of thinking, obviously, wasn't as aggressive as Oakmont was, but some pretty good thick rough that the ball could really sit down in and trying to get out of that, I was like, man, I could just imagine this times two and thinking about what the men at the US Open were dealing with. But yeah, certainly Gil's the man of the hour. Let's get into our interview with him. Again, thanks to Gil for the time. Thanks to Baltusrol for having us out. And I hope you enjoy these 5 questions with master golf course architect Gil Hanse.
I'm Al Lunsford, digital editor for Links Magazine, here with Gil Hanse, the course architect in charge of the restoration of the A.W. Tillinghast designed dual courses at Baltusrol Golf Club, first of their kind, Springfield, New Jersey, 16 USGA championships, 2 PGAs, more on the way with the 2029 PGA Championship on the lower course. We're here for the reopening of the upper course here today, though. Gil, you're the man of the hour. The current weeks we've had with Oakmont, the US Open, and the KPMG Women's PGA at Frisco. So a lot going on for you.
Yes, there is.
Now you're trying to figure out where you're at from place to place.
2 cups of coffee helping me.
The miles are adding up for you. But we got a quick 5 questions for Gil. So let's start. We'll sort of refer to Oakmont, since a lot of people heard your name at the U.S. Open. Heard a lot about your renovation at Oakmont and how it wasn't really specific to restoring a particular year or point in time, but kind of picked and choose from a lot of the Phones' work. But how is the restoration of the lower course and the upper course here at Baltusrol different in your approach?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We had 44 years of history with the Phones family, tinkering and moving and pushing stuff around that we had to draw from in order to figure out what was the best version of Oakmont for the modern game. Here it was simpler, right? I mean, it was Tillinghast came in here, built both golf courses at the same time. We were able to have a lot of archival information as to how they were laid out. So we focused on that, sort of mid to late 20s time frame to look at his work here. And he didn't make any significant alterations after that. In fact, the alterations that did occur were done by others. So I think from that standpoint, it was a lot easier to lock in and focus on a time frame. And I think the fact that he built both golf courses at the same time gave us the opportunity to look at how they were commingled, and the features were very similar from one golf course to the other. And the biggest change was the topography from the upper to the lower.
Yeah, I was talking to the club historians, and they were, they handed you an iPad, right,
Yes.
with the historical imagery, and you sort of could, if they couldn't find it on an image of one course, maybe it was in the background of another, and put
yeah,
the pieces
they
together.
were great. I mean, you're right. Some of the stuff that you would find just was from the most obscure sources, but we also had irrigation plans from the original golf courses. We had aerial photographs. We were very, very fortunate that they were able to provide us with that information, which gave us the level of detail that we needed from a restoration standpoint.
Very interesting. So question number 2, in your letter to the club's membership, you talked about it's not just that the technology of golf equipment today is different, and there have been improvements made, obviously, in the game, but the continued advancements in how we maintain our courses has been the biggest cause for change in this era. Can you speak more to that and how you struck the balance here with respect to the original design?
Sure. I think from the standpoint of the infrastructural changes here, it was time. They needed to move forward. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of championship golf courses, the ones that are going to continue to host major championships, are investing in the infrastructure. So USGA greens construction, precision air here to move water through the profile quickly, new irrigation system tailored to the design. So the best technology in the world for one of the best superintendents in the world, and Greg Boring. And so from that standpoint, your expectation is always high as far as maintenance is concerned here. But I think from that championship perspective, it's the ability to get a golf course back in play quickly. And from our standpoint, we really feel that that infrastructure is critical to the championship conditioning here. But from an architecture standpoint, we strongly believe that the greens at places like, you name it. Is it Augusta? Is it Pinehurst? Is it Pine Valley? The ones Wingfoot, the ones we hold out to be the best examples of architecture are all of this era, and they're all of the slope, and the hole locations are challenging as it relates to green speeds. But what we've done is principally reclaim hole locations through expansion of greens into areas where we can flatten around the perimeter, because sand had built up over the years. We've also nipped and tucked a little bit, probably a little bit more on the upper and the internal contours of the greens to restore hole locations. But the primary defenses of these golf courses from a championship standpoint are firm greens, fast greens, and then ultimately rough. And we know we can get the rough healthy here. So it becomes, how do you present firm greens? Well, if you have this substructure underneath to do that. And then how do you present fast greens? And what we did here was we actually lifted the POA off of the greens and put it back down, because Greg feels really comfortable with maintaining POA. So we feel like we can give smooth, quick surfaces, enough hole locations that the variety changes and the challenge changes, which, all the way down the line, angles, et cetera, from an architecture perspective. But feel really good about the confluence of how the infrastructure and the architecture match up.
Interesting. Something to remember in 2029 when we're, 4 years down the road.
Let's hope we don't have to turn them on.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
hope Mother Nature gives us a nice week.
Exactly. For those unfamiliar with the upper course, how does it differ from the championship test that is the lower course?
I think it's topography, and it's Tillinghast's use of topography in regards to the cross slopes and trying to get preferred angles into greens and setting them up that you either have to hold your ball into a cross slope or you have to let the ball feed with the slope down to a position to get better angles. You didn't have that opportunity on the lower. I mean, there's only a couple holes on the lower where you've got enough topography to create that. So I think his use of topography on the upper is really the primary difference. The green complexes, the bunker complexes, maybe a little bit larger on the lower because he had less to work with from a natural standpoint. So I think he tried to create features that were a little bit bolder down there. But I think ultimately the character of the upper is predicated on that topography and his wonderful use of it.
That was question 3. So question 4, we'll talk a little bit more about A.W. Tillinghast. What do you think are his greatest strengths as a designer? I know you've worked on a couple of his courses over the years, or maybe some of your favorite features across his designs.
I mean, whenever I think of Tillinghast, the first thing that pops into my head are greens. You know, the green complexes that he created at different, and he was a bit of a chameleon in that architects of that era, he probably had the most significant alterations in the presentations of golf courses that he built. Some of them were big and bold, and the green complexes were fairly eccentric. You look at a place like Fenway, and some of them were much more subtle. And some of the holes here at Baltusrol, I think Quaker Ridge's greens are more on the subtle spectrum. And then you get places like Wingfoot where you've got combination of bold and also subtle. So I think from his standpoint, the thing we love the most about restoring his work is that we really feel there needs to be a really high level, although this goes across the spectrum, but with him in particular, high level of specificity to what did he do on this property. We're not big fans of the word typical, like what did he typically do? We don't like that anyway, but I think as it relates to Tillinghast, it's a much more specific look and feel per property. And so I think that's one of the things that from an architecture standpoint really is interesting and to a certain degree challenging when you're trying to restore his work.
So maybe a diverse, dynamic type of guy in terms of what he could bring to the table. It didn't really matter where he was going to be site specific.
Absolutely, which I think is one of the best attributes of any golf architect.
Yeah. And last question for you, what are you currently working on? What else is on the docket for you, and what's next?
Yeah, Jim and I joke that I think the perception is that we're working on every golf course project in the entire world, but we're not. We've right now have 3 really wonderful projects under construction. 2 new ones, one in Childress, Texas, Childress Hall, which is lovely sort of sand dune site right on the Red River. Tom Doak built the first golf course there, so very much like Baltusrol. It'll have 36 golf courses, 2 designers. And then also we're working at High Grove in the middle of Florida, another private club, spectacular for Florida and spectacular for anywhere. I mean, 40 to 50, 60 feet of elevation change, pure white sand playing through orange groves. The contrast there is really exciting. And I think, both of those, we're excited for them to be finished, not because we don't want to work there anymore, but because we're excited for people to see them. And then in the vein of our restoration work, Seminole. So we're working on the front 9 at Seminole right now. I was down there yesterday for the grassing of the greens. So that's going really well, and a lot of respect and trying to restore some of Donald Ross's, the character to the greens that we could see from his plans and what we could see from earlier aerial photographs. So we're really excited about what's happening down there.
Yeah, from Oakmont to Seminole to Baltusrol. I mean,
it's an embarrassment of riches.
You're playing the hits.
We're very fortunate that people have entrusted us with these great things, and we just keep our heads down and keep going.
Well, congratulations. Look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.